Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. So today is a very special day because we have another guest on the show, and we will talk about something that I've covered in the newsletter for a couple of times. And it's something that is important for all of us because, let's be honest, all of our apps have bugs. All of our apps run into situations where stuff goes wrong and where you need to do something against that. And we need to communicate to our users what's happening and what they can do in order to work around the situation. And we're talking about error messages. So without further ado, I'll bring on my today's guest, and then he can introduce himself, and we can talk about how to create better error messages. So let me bring him on. And here he is. Hey, Cihat, how's it going?
It's going great. Hi, everybody. How are you doing?
So, folks on the stream, if you have any questions, you can always use the live chat to send questions, and we will take them onto the stream and answer them as they come in. But before we get started, I think we should maybe talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we can get into how you came up with ErrorKit. So, introduce yourself.
So thanks for having me. It's really great that you invited me over. So my name is Cihat, and I'm an indie developer, and I develop tools for other indie developers like TranslateKit or FreemiumKit. And I also do a lot of open source work. I did that like for 10 years already now. And being an indie developer myself and having published around 10 apps in the past 2 years, I had a lot of these typical struggles that you have while working on apps. And that's why I'm building tools to make new app development easier. And ErrorKit is just one of them. And I have others like ReviewKit and TranslateKit SDK. They're all open source as well. My most successful one used to be BartyCrouch, which was also a localization tool. But basically, that got my newest app, TranslateKit now, which is now a real paid app, basically, which is using AI. But yeah, that's my quick history.
Okay, so where are you based, actually?
I'm based in Mainz. That's close in Germany. That's close to Frankfurt. And I think you're in Hamburg, right?
I am in Hamburg, yeah. So it's interesting because I was born in Siegen, which you might know. It's not far away from Mainz, and I was raised in a small village near Frankfurt called Kilianstetten,
Oh, nice.
and lived there until I finished school, and then I moved to Hamburg. So I've if I try, I can imitate a little bit of Hessian dialect. I don't know if you can if you can do that as well. But
I'm not originally from here. I'm like from Stuttgart region, so I'm a Swabian. So I probably wouldn't understand it. Yeah, you can try. You can
well,
try.
it's not that different than normal German, but
Yeah,
it's
my
it has
relative is.
this funny, the harsh sounds are softened, and there is more
Right.
melody in the language.
Right.
I think Swabian is similar
I
to
don't
that.
actually speak Swabian. I understand a little bit of it, but
Mhm.
I like Hessisch more because many of my relatives actually also live around here,
Yeah,
and they have that accent. I always liked it. So yeah,
yeah.
you can. It's good.
Gell?
Yeah, like the ish, right? Instead of ich.
Ja,
Yeah.
ich habe das nicht gemacht.
Yeah, it's sweet. Really sweet. Awesome.
So what did you do before going indie and doing lots of open source work?
So I used to work like after university, which was around 2014. I used to work for a app agency where I was the iOS team lead. And I worked there for 4 years, like on probably 80, 90 different apps, which was awesome for me because I could learn so many different things about app development and about different kinds of apps as well. and many APIs. And also during that time, because app agency means you're working on many different apps, I was also already thinking about, okay, how can I optimize a workflow, the developer workflow? How can I introduce new kinds of stuff? That's how I came up with BartyCrouch, which was like a tool you integrate into Xcode to like simplify your localization workflow. That was basically the thing. And yeah, that's how I got used to creating developer tools and making app development easier, because we were working for an app agency and so many different apps.
Oh yeah. So but one of the issues I found. So before I joined Google, I worked at a couple of consulting companies as well. After having worked at Lufthansa Systems in the beginning of my career, and I found that finding the time for working on those tools that make your lives easier, that is hard, right? Because depending on how your contract looks like, it is not work that any client would be happy to pay for. And then your company needs to say, well, but we think it's important because we can use it to make our lives easier and there will be benefit for us. But oftentimes it's difficult to explain that to your managers, or your managers are having a hard time, I don't know, maybe to understand that, or they don't want to understand it, right? They want to be able to bill you or bill your clients for your work. And so did you run into any challenges like that as well?
Actually, all of the tools that we were working like open source, also many internal tools, they started in my free time, because I was like just like annoyed about some things at work. I was like, we can do this better. Like, for example, even things like Swift lint were new back then, and linting Swift code. So when you switch between like 50 different apps, you have always the same code style. And also you have many people working on a team. You want to have like one code style, so you don't have to get into discussions too much. And things like these were new. We also contribute. I personally started always on my free time. I started contributing to these things because I just cared about these things. And then once these tools were useful enough, I just presented them to the team. I was like, hey, I built this tool, maybe we can use it. And then basically the company started, okay, that looks cool. That looks like it can save time. And from there on, like the maintenance part and adding more features, that was easier to do. And but also being the iOS team lead, like relatively quickly at that company, I could also make up a little bit of time for like internal tasks that are for like being more efficient, because working for a customer at the end of the day also means you have to work efficiently. And if something makes you and your team faster, at the end of the day, it always pays out for them as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. So okay, so ErrorKit is one of the tools, one of the open source SDKs, libraries that you've got out there. So yeah, walk me through how you arrived at that. What's the problem that it solves, and how does it solve it?
Okay, so ErrorKit is to be right, open about that right away. Is ErrorKit is a mix of different tools. It's not just one solution for one specific problem, but it started with the basic problem that error handling in Swift is very much error handling of Objective-C, because how Swift, when it was first created, was designed in the error handling part, is that we have the error protocol, which you probably all know. The error protocol basically is just something like a type alias for NS error. And NS error has a history, it has a design, it has, I would say it's based on like desktop computers, where also the macOS user interface was built with a help menu. And oftentimes you have a dialog, sometimes you can retry, sometimes you have extra info and stuff like that. So it's built in a different way than I would say Swift native error protocol would have been built. Specifically, one thing I always get confused about is the error protocol itself doesn't have any API. It doesn't define any function. It has no requirements. You can like put anything and say like error, and then you get some magical behavior from NS error, from Objective-C, and not really from Swift. You don't have to do anything. And that's something that confuses me. But what you get is this localized description, right? Which you can call in, like when you print something, you like catch an error. You can always say error.localized description. So what I saw many times and did myself also a few times is basically write an error type like enum my custom error colon error. So I conform to error, and then I just wrote a computer property which I called localized description. And the thing is, if you do that, you might think when you like print out your error, when you catch it, and just call error.localized description, you might print whatever you put in that computer property, but that's not the case. It doesn't work like that. What happens is when you call that localized description, because of how generics work in Swift, it just doesn't call your function because it's not a defined function in the error protocol. There is no function there. Instead, it calls something from NS error, which tries to, like using reflection and mirroring, tries to get some info from your enum. But if you have a Swift enum, what you actually get is the index of your enum case. So you get an error like, for example, if my error is called profile error, the error description you get is profile error .0, even though the case name maybe is something like network problem or something like that. You don't get that even. And that's like one of the main things I always came across, like my code myself, because I didn't remember how to do it properly, because I'm not writing error types every day. And I saw that also in many open source frameworks and many apps, many beginner code. And that's why I thought, okay, I have to do something about it. That was like the first thing.
Cool. All right. So maybe let's look at some code and see how this works. So I'm going to bring on your screen, and then maybe we can start with at the beginning. Maybe let's look at how the problem looks.
Let me actually share just one window, maybe.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, we can do that. This one.
This should be easier. Exactly. So. This is the ErrorKit repository.
And maybe you can also increase the font size a little bit so it's easier for people to read.
Sure.
Just press Command plus.
I have to find the plus on my new keyboard. Okay. I got a Japanese keyboard because I was in Japan. And yeah, it's totally different.
Very cool.
Yeah. This is ErrorKit. And when you go into ErrorKit, there is some documentation here, but the main documentation actually sits here. So if you press that, you get into a docc based documentation, and you can find 6 different articles in here which basically go into more detail about the different things I solved. But the one I just talked about is actually here. And yeah, here's the code. I don't know if that's large enough, maybe even larger.
I think if you make it a little bit larger, it'll be fine.
Okay, let me actually try to hide the sidebar. Okay.
Or maybe I can, let me see if this is better. No.
Okay, so what I was just talking about is exactly this. I'm defining a network error. I'm conforming to error, and I have 2 enum cases. And when I now write localized description, and I just define my own text, but then I call this, like I throw this error, somehow it gets thrown, and I print the localized description. What I actually get is the operation couldn't be completed. My app.network error 0. And 0 is because I used the no connection to server, which is
and that's the first case. Okay, exactly. So if you use the parsing failed, it would say error 1, right?
Exactly. That's how it works, but it's not what you would expect, right?
No, yeah.
You would expect to get your message, and that's like I said, it's because of how NS error is mapped. And the official solution, there is a solution. It's not like there is no solution. There is a solution. It's called localized error. And localized error is like a protocol that conforms to error, but adds 4 different optional requirements. But I wouldn't really call them requirements because they're optional. And these are the 4 ones here: error description, failure reason, recovery suggestion, and help anchor. So if error handling is done right, and I'm sure like in Firebase SDKs and stuff like that, it is probably done right, they conform to localized error and implement error description, not to mix up with localized description. error description is the main thing that will be used when you call localized description. This is, I don't know why it's designed this way, but it is like this right now. And NS error used to work completely differently. Like in NS error times, there was like a user info dictionary, and you would put some localized description key there, and that will be like the error description. So this is easier than NS error times, but the name of this and the name of what you call, there's like this discrepancy there, and that's basically one of the reasons why I think many errors are actually not done correctly.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So it makes me wonder why Apple doesn't advocate for this better, right? So shouldn't they say, well, if you want to implement your own errors, here's how you do it. Use localized error, and then you get like really nice error handling.
I think Apple is doing that. Like Apple wants us to use localized error. That's how it's designed. And if you use that, and if you override or implement error description, it's all fine. One of the reasons why this is often a problem is if you actually do conform to localized error, because this is optional, this is an optional requirement, you don't get a compilation error if you do not implement error description. So oftentimes what I even see is sometimes developers conform to localized error and still like don't remember what was the name of the function again, what I need to override, because there are 4 of them, right? And if you actually type localized description in Xcode, you also get an auto-completion like you would get for error description. So it's still easy to get this wrong. And my basic idea was, let's implement a new protocol that does exactly what we would expect, which is a string requirement, which is not optional. So when you conform to it, the compiler would actually fail and say, hey, this is missing. And this is what I call throwable, because I think throwable is also a good name for basically the error type in Swift, because codable and everything is named able, and you're throwing it, right? So it is a throwable. That's what I thought this name would be, like a native. And I named this one field that I think should be the requirement user-friendly message, because what I also often see, and you can see that here as well, is that this message is not localized. And being someone who cares about localization, I want the developer to like immediately know, okay, this thing is user-facing, so it should probably be localized like any UI interface you have. Yeah, basically, and that's the idea behind user-friendly message, so it's clear.
Okay, so can you go back to that part in the code? Okay, so when you implement that, then you would have okay. Can you show the code where you implement an error message using your protocol?
Yes, this is the same network error that we had just above with throwable. It basically looks the same as the localized description one, but this time because the compiler actually tells us, hey, if you don't implement this, then you're not conforming to throwable. You can't miss it, and you have to implement it. And if you have an enum specifically, and you do a switch self, which is very common in enums, then you can't also forget to like return something for any of these. And then you have, what I also did here is I used the localized, which you should do in error description as well. But yeah, for me, like the user-friendly message name reminds you of, okay, this is for the user, so please localize.
But you could still return something that's non-localized.
You could, yeah, of course. Actually, I have done something that is about convenience, because oftentimes you write an error type because you're currently developing, you're in the middle of like implementing a feature or something like that. You don't have the time to localize everything or think about the best error message or something like that. And maybe you don't even want to like implement this whole thing with switch self, etc., because you might not need to localize. In that case, what you can actually do with this type is you can say, hey, I'm just giving those error cases a raw string. Like you're saying, this is an enum, which has a raw value type of string. And this is basically how you get started really quickly. And you don't even have to implement user-friendly message, because I basically do it for you.
Ah, okay.
That's also like a convenience built into the ErrorKit framework.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
And yeah, that's a throwable type. There's really not too much more about that than that it tries to make the confusion less confusing.
Yeah, pretty cool. All right. So, okay. So when you want to use this in your own apps, you would, instead of saying, I have an enum that is a network error and it conforms to error or localized error, you would conform to throwable and then implement your user-friendly message function, and that's basically it, right?
Yeah, that's the throwable protocol. It's a drop-in replacement for error or localized error, and it actually conforms to localized error. And I make sure that whatever you write in user-friendly message gets passed to error description. So it's just fully compatible with the existing system.
Okay, cool. Should we try to to build something? Maybe we can build a little app that has the problem and then see how your library solves that problem.
Sure. Like, should we start a new app, or do you want to work on your own app? Or
Yeah. We can start on a new app first, and then once I get the hang of it, I think we can switch over to my end, and then we can see if we can improve the code on my app. I think that would be cool.
Okay, sure. In that case, I have to share an Xcode window. Just open an app here. Window, Xcode. There we go.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, you should see it now. And basically, what we need to do first is we need to add ErrorKit to the app. I just created this empty app here right before the stream. So what we need to do first is go here into our apps, package dependencies, press plus, and enter copy the link of ErrorKit, add it as a package to our app. And now when we go here and import ErrorKit, we have access to our new type. And actually, yeah, should we come up with new errors, or should I just copy what we had in the documentation? Oh,
let's do something. Yeah, amazing app error. Okay, maybe. Okay, so I want to make sure that we properly understand the problem. So instead of using ErrorKit from the start, let's build an error that doesn't use ErrorKit. So let's build an error that uses error in the first place, and then yeah, just 2 or 3 cases, whatever. I don't know. Unicorn not found. Yeah, that's great. Rainbow not found. Rainbow missing.
Color missing. Something like that. I don't know. And we can already see this whole thing built. I'm not getting any errors. So when I wanted to say, okay, I want to do the localized description thing, it actually, I get the auto-completion, everything is there. I could also do error description, but now if I do error description, I even use the auto-completion here. This is not conforming to localized error, so I'm not even sure what's going to happen now. I think it might work, but like we have to do a localized error for it to for sure work. We could try like what happens.
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try and see what happens.
Let's just actually add a button here. Say like throw, and then yeah, we can just throw our do catch. Throw amazing app error, unicorn not found. Let's catch it also, and now print error dot localized description. See what happens. Oh, you can't see the.
No, we can't.
Yeah.
I think we need to.
Can I get 2 windows?
Yeah, you can share another window. Just if you share the simulator, I can bring this on. Let me see if I can get the right one. Okay. And I might have to switch back and forth.
Okay, so you're seeing the simulator now. Okay, great. So I press from me, and now if we go back to Xcode.
Yeah, let's see which one. Where's the Xcode window though? It's not this one. Is it this one? No, that's your entire screen.
All right, maybe that's better. Let me just hide this. So, so we can put this on the left here, and you can see here the operation couldn't be complete. Amazing app error 0.
Yep, exactly.
That's exactly what I talked about before.
Yeah.
And if we conform this to localized error, and note that I already implemented error description. So this was already the correct thing, but I just specified error instead of localized error. Now, if I do it, I should actually get the right message. So press from me. Now I'm getting unicorn not found.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you had been using throwable, and let's actually do it with this commented out. So you can see like you're getting this does not conform, and you even get this. You can say, fix it for me. Okay, I need to use a friendly message. Let's add that. And then if auto-completion worked, you would not even have to type anything. But yeah, you get the idea. Let's just do it like this. Use a friendly message. And if you run this and press throw me, you also get unicorn not found.
Okay.
But even better, because we don't have anything here that is like a variable or something like that, I can actually do like this. And just say this is a string raw value type. I have less
and then remove that. Okay.
And I can run it again. Say throw me, and I get unicorn not found.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty cool.
So that's like the.
What happens if you don't provide the? Oh, so if you need to provide the string if you say it is a string, right?
Yeah, for sure. It won't compile otherwise.
Yeah.
Or exactly. No, it actually uses the name of the case.
Oh yeah. Okay, let's see that.
That's like an automatic string feature, Swift feature, and then you get the case name.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not what I would recommend, but yeah, this
is. And then if you remove string from the list of protocols that you conform to, then it will throw a compile error because you don't have the method.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's what you don't get with error or localized error. Even localized error, it just compiles and tells you, like, does not tell you that actually something is wrong. And that's the non-Swifty part, because the very definition of Swift for me is that when you do something wrong, it tells you at compile time, like, you did something wrong, please fix this. And that's the power you lose when you use localized error.
Yeah, I think people might have varying degrees of opinions about how well the error messages that Swift gives you are, specifically for Swift UI, but generally I think we can all agree.
Yeah, Swift UI is a different beast, that's true. Yeah, especially when you basically don't get any errors because just the compiler is compiling very long until it tells you, yeah, I just can't compile. So it's a different problem though.
Okay, cool. All right. So I think I have a rough understanding of how it works.
The first of 6 different features, and this is the most basic one.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, all right. So tell me about the other ones.
Yeah, maybe if you can just show the Safari again.
Yeah, let's. I need to find my mouse. Let's see. Is it this one? No, that's the URL one. This one. Okay.
Right. So that was the throwable protocol. And we have another thing, which is fixing other problems. Because oftentimes what I found is when you get an error from the system, like a URL error, like here, when I just say like try data and then load some contents, what you might get actually is something that's not really a user-friendly message. I don't know if I have the message here, but it's really throwing something that's not really real. Just a second. What you often get is something like the operation couldn't be completed. URL error -1011. So that's what you can get exactly with this code. And it's not really useful to get that kind of thing. So what I did in ErrorKit is I basically went through different system errors that are very common, like network errors, file-based errors, or database errors with core data, mapkit errors. And I just found like, okay, I can actually map those to better messages. So network, like these are the kinds of errors that any application might run into. And I just built the better messages into ErrorKit. And the function that I use, so if you want to get that message, it's called user-friendly message, but it's on the ErrorKit like a singleton class, you could say, singleton type. It's called the same as the Froebel protocol's requirement. So it's like consistent. You only have to remember one thing. But this is basically what I would recommend when using ErrorKit. You should call on any error, because it will not only use the right error message for throwable types, but also any system error type could have an improved message.
And so did you do that for all the error messages in the system, all the system error messages?
Not all of them. No. I couldn't ever do it all by myself. I can actually show you the code if you share the entire screen. Again.
Okay. This one? Yeah.
Yes. So this is the ErrorKit framework itself. And you can see there are error mappers. That's what I call it. And you can see that there is a core data error mapper, a foundation error mapper, and a mapkit error mapper. And those are the ones I implemented so far. And you can see what I did, for example, for the foundation error mapper, which is the network URL stuff included, is maybe I should go first to the error mapper protocol. It's a very simple protocol. Just says you have to implement a static function called user-friendly message. And it gets an error, but it responds with an optional string. Why an optional string? Because when you don't want to map something, you can just return nil, and then the system will just continue to the next mapper and try to find something.
Okay.
So what I did here is I went through the error that I got passed. I switched over and said, okay, when this is an URL error, and this is a known error code named not connected to internet, then I give back this way improved message compared to what you get from the system by default. And it's also localized. So there's like a whole localization here in the thing for all kinds of messages. I just see I have to update some of them, but I think that's a naming issue. But yeah, you basically map them to better messages. And I did this for URL error, for CoCore error, which you get for things like file, no such file, something like that, POSIX errors, and core data errors. And these are the ones I ran into or found others ran into. So I implemented them. But the idea is that the community can jump in and say, like, okay, I'm always running into this one. And they can add it either to like this switch case here, or they can even create their own whatever mapper it is and just add it like that to the ErrorKit project. And so the entire community can profit from everybody adding better mappings for error messages that they ran into and didn't understand, but they figured out what it actually means, and then they put the meaning into the error message.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I really like that. So would it ever be useful to have different error messages? Let's say, you know, for any of those that you cover in ErrorKit. Let's say in one company, they might say, we want to have a different type of error message for that. Let's say, for example, for the no such file found. And they'll say, well, you know, we want a slightly different wording here because we think, you know, that is more appropriate. And as the project maintainer, you might say, well, I think this error message is good here. So what would they have to do in that case?
Yeah, so actually, the error map protocol, it's public. And the whole system is built in a way that the error mappers that you have here, let me just search for it so you can see the implementation. These are the internal error mappers. But let me go, let me actually show it here in the documentation. I think that's the faster way. exactly, that's where it's. So you can implement your own error mapper, and you can do like whatever you found like already implemented in ErrorKit. You can just say, hey, but this one I want to have different message. So in your app project, you just implement your own error mapper. You just override whatever case that is. You just add your whatever text you want to have there, and you just say ErrorKit the register mapper. The way ErrorKit is implemented is the last mapper that is registered always gets the highest priority. So all the mappers that are also automatically added inside ErrorKit, they always have lower priority than any mappers you add yourself. So you can basically override that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. So you would implement your own error mapper, and then you could basically override all of the error messages and resolutions that you have predefined.
Yeah,
and you could
we have
also, yeah, go ahead.
What we have built in into ErrorKit is just the improvement of the system fallback, which is now a new, better fallback, but you can still override it like you could also do with the system ones. And this is also a great way for improving any third-party tools. Even like if you actually found that the Firebase errors for whatever reason were not really good, and okay, Firebase is a bad example because it's open source. You can just go in there and just fix it if you want to. But imagine it's a closed source one, and you want to improve the errors, but not just for one project. You want to improve it for every project, maybe even for the entire community. You could create a new Swift package and just import ErrorKit there, and just use an error mapper in your Swift package. And that Swift package would basically provide for this whatever third-party SDK it is, provide an error mapper for that SDK, which everybody could use. So that way, like, there could be, like, in theory, we could have a flourishing community of packages that all improve errors everywhere in all SDKs.
Okay. So do you have a tag for ErrorKit contributions on the project to foster this community?
That's a good question. That's something I didn't think about yet. So maybe ErrorKit? I don't know. Yeah, we're having a matrix effect here. But yeah, that's the second feature. Should I continue with the other ones? Or
yeah, let's go through all of them.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short for every one of them, because the basic ones are the most important ones, these two. The third one is a bit more sophisticated. What I found oftentimes, and I explained this here as well, is I have many functions that are throwing, and ignore this part here. This is a Swift 6 feature that just ignore it for now. You have this, and then you try to basically, maybe this is not a good example. Let me scroll down. I think I have a better one down here. There we go. So I have a function that throws something, and that function itself calls other functions that might throw something, like try. This is a file system one, and I'm doing try database load user. So this is actually a function that might call that might throw a different error. And oftentimes, what I have when I get an error, not oftentimes, but always, when you actually catch an error somewhere, you're always catching the most down the whatever. Like when I was calling load profile, and load profile was calling load user, and maybe load user is calling something else, you only get the error from the something else. You don't know that I was calling load profile and that was calling load user. And you don't know the chain. You lose that. And so I wanted to fix that. Like, you could do it like if you were doing it during debugging, you could see during debugging, but not when it happens in user's hands. You just get like the error message that's like the leaf node of the errors. And actually what I wanted to have is, and that's only possible with type throws in Swift 6, or possible in a better way, is I wanted to have something where I say what I did here, load profile, can only throw a profile error. This is a new feature in Swift 6 for everyone who hasn't used it yet. Is basically, this is like it throws, but the compiler makes sure that anything you throw in here has to be of type profile error. And that's really cool if you have nesting. For example, this load user, this is also a throwing function. And in this case, I'm manually mapping, because when I didn't put a do catch here in this case, the load user function that I call here, if it throws a different type than profile error, this whole function does not compile. So I have to make sure whatever is thrown here is mapped to profile error as well. And I have to do it manually here. So I do like, okay, I do it in a do block. Then I have another do block because I'm doing something else trying here as well. I'm catching this one and I'm mapping it to, I'm basically wrapping it inside this case, which has network error. And the other one, I'm mapping inside this case. So all of a sudden, to have this chain, so I understand like where the errors are coming from, I have to add a lot of cases for all the different calls I make. And that's something like I wanted to have this information, but getting to this information was very cumbersome. This is the code you have to write to get there. And with ErrorKit, though, I added a new protocol called catching. And it has one requirement, which is caught. You have to add a caught case. And it can have any error in there. So you get basically one single case that handles all kind of nested errors you might ever have there. So this turns the little profile function, which still throws a profile error, into something where whenever you have something like this that is throwing some other type, or like this is another other type, you just have to do profile error, which is the error you want to return, and then you just call the catch function. What the catch function does is whatever is thrown inside here is mapped to the caught case. So anything that is thrown inside this closure is mapped to the caught case, but anything you return in this closure will be basically returned from the whole function. So you can use it without having to nest a lot of code, but you can still return anything, any type you want to return. This is returning a user profile, and you avoid nesting, but still get the like keeping all the nesting intact.
Okay, so, but doesn't that also mean that if I want to figure out that I specifically have to inspect inspect the error that is thrown from here for the caught case and then dig into that?
I'm not really sure what you're asking for, but maybe I will continue. That will answer your question because it doesn't end here. So with the catching protocol, what I actually have also added, apart from the catch case, is error chain debugging. And I think this is its own article. Yes. So basically what you get usually, like I said, is only the leaf node. And that's like the problem when you want to actually know where things are getting called from. But what I built into the ErrorKit framework is this function, which is called error chain description, which when you have an error that conforms to catching, then you actually get something like this. So you get the profile error, and then inside the profile error, which was the function's main error type, something has thrown a database error, and then in there, something has thrown a file error, and in this case, I'm also even reflecting like the enum name, how I get the not found, and I'm also reflecting on the parameter you're passing, so you even get that. And because that's what you usually also want to know, like what the user would see, you also get the user-friendly message. So you see everything in one place, and that's like how I would recommend doing debugging with ErrorKit.
Yeah, that looks very nice. So you know, this is actually what you would see on your terminal output. This nicely formatted message there.
Exactly. I even, like in the last version, I even improved this to be a bit simpler, and now it can be written like you can say like something failed, and you just say error. So it can now be written like this.
Ooh.
Because whenever you use always log, I'm assuming you're debugging. You're not showing this to the user because this can't be something you show to the user. So I'm assuming that you would want to use error chain description and not user-friendly message. And so I just implemented like an overload function for all the logger things, where you just pass the error, and I just, whatever this error is, I just call error chain description on it. And yeah, that's an even more convenient way. So I should update this documentation actually. Maybe I have it down here. Yes, I do. Yeah, I just added it here. So you can see this, you can now write this. So this makes it a little bit more convenient, but that's basically what you get with the error chain description.
So people on the stream are amazed. So somebody says such a cool library, and I agree. It's pretty cool. So very, very powerful. And we haven't even seen all of the features.
Right. I don't know if we can get to all of them, but something that's also in here I can maybe explain in context. What I always try to know of my apps is actually which errors happen most often and which affects most users. That's what I want to know. So what I usually do is I actually try to send errors to some analytics and then just look up like in some chart that has either a table or pie chart or something like that, which ones appear like happen most often. The problem I ran into though with this though is I'm often passing parameters like here, and I always localize my error messages.
Yep.
So what happens in my case is they don't get grouped properly because each parameter is different. So I can't group this specific structure like till here. I can't group that in analytics tools easily. So what I built into ErrorKit is if you used the caching protocol, you can actually just call ErrorKit.groupingID. And what it will do is it will basically treat this one here and this one here the same, despite having different parameters, like here, and even being localized, like here. So it just looks at the structure, basically.
Yeah. So how do you compute the ID?
Yeah, basically I get this string and build a hash on it and get like the last few characters of that hash.
Okay, cool. So even if even if it's nested in a different way, the hash would be different.
Yes, exactly. That's what I want. Like in my case, I want to know that when it's nested in a different way, because that means it is called from a different place. And when it's called from a different place, it's like a different user interface situation. So I want to treat that differently than others, but I don't want to treat like different parameters or localizations differently. So yeah.
Okay, so and that means when sending this to your analytics service, you would just be sending the hash plus the message.
Exactly. Like I'm basically sending both because I also want to know like the details, because it gives me more context than this hash, which I'm using
pretty
this
difficult to just find out what's going on by looking at the hash.
This is like when you want to like detect like which different parameters like can be grouped together. I just use the group ID. And then this is basically used for the pie chart, etc. But if I want to know specifically for this group ID, what is the actual issue? I just press into a specific event and look at the details.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And yeah, that's like the another feature that is built into ErrorKit. I'm not sure how far we have. Like we haven't seen this. We have seen this. There's two more little things, which I can really cover real quickly. The first is built-in error types, because I come across defining these types that you can see here, like database error, file error, network error, validation error, state error. I define them in many different apps over and over again. They often have the same cases. So what I just did here is for the most common ones, I just edit the most common cases and localize them. So I don't have to do it over and over again. I don't think that ErrorKit should grow too much in this regard, but if you come across some error case that really is very common, feel free to add it to the ErrorKit library. I'm always open for pull requests that are adding common things.
Can we take a look at operation error? I'm just curious what the cases are.
So operation error, maybe we can do, everything is documented in detail, so I have to scroll a lot. We have dependency failed, canceled, and I always add a generic one because oftentimes you have a different message. You know it's an operation error. You don't want to define your own error type. It's like too much work. So I just said like, okay, each one gets a generic case, so you can add whatever string you want. Yeah, these are the cases. not many cases.
So it would be for what's the dependency failed case for? So is that when you have a service and the service depends on another service and that failed?
Yeah, the operation could not start due to a dependency failure. So whatever operation you were trying, you have a dependency problem, like network connection. You can specify your dependency.
Yeah, but it's, it's this kind of error is pretty generic, so you don't prescribe for what kind of operation you would have to use it, right? So I can, I could use it for anything that I treat as an operation.
Absolutely, yeah. I try to keep these generic. Some of them are a bit less generic than others because just the cases are more known. Like if you go to network error, no internet, timeout, bad request, server error. The default things. I also added the usual stuff like code and message. But if they don't fit, you can always go to generic error, or you can, of course, always define your own ones. But if you just want to save time, because like I said, I find myself always trying to save time during development. And these ones I have to define, like parsing error. I have defined parsing error at least 5 times, being a localization developer. Like parsing strings files, string dict files, string catalogs, stuff like that.
This is really useful. I mean, like even just that is such a useful addition, because you don't have to think about, have I covered all the bases and all the cases, and how should I name this? So I think this is really convenient. Yeah,
and they're all localized, so you get some extra for free, and that's basically it. So there's really not much more to it. And the last one is, this is a Swift UI related one, or error logging system of Apple related one. What many people actually, I figure, don't know is if you use OS log, which is, by the way, the recommended way how you should log in iOS applications nowadays, you can just use logger like this, and then you can just call like error, warning, info, etc. What many people don't know is that actually Apple has implemented a way how you get all the things that were logged here from a file. They are automatically logged to a file for your app. How to get that all so you can send it like via email to yourself from the user, so you can better dig into the issues. I know that larger companies, I'm sure they have their own logging system. Maybe they're even using Apple's logging system, and there are also other third-party frameworks. But if you use Apple's, what I added into ErrorKit is actually this Mail Composer Swift UI modifier, which also implements the UI kit part. So you don't have to do the UI kit mapping here for you to open the Mail Composer. So basically what happens is when you add this to your app, I could just copy this. We can just have a look in the simulator, because we have our app here already, right? There we go. So we have to add a state here. And that has to be show Mail Composer. And it's false at the start. And now if I run this, it should actually work already. And you can see that it has a Mail Composer here. Report a problem. Okay, I can show it here. Okay, do I have a screenshot down here? No, I don't. But basically what happens...
because there's no mail on the simulator.
Right, exactly. Maybe I could set up one, but yeah, I'm not going to do that right now. What it does is that it opens the Mail Composer, adds all the details you might want to know from a user, so you don't have to answer them, ask like, hey, can you give me the iOS version, the device version? You have that already in there. They can describe whatever they found there, and you could even extend this. Like, this is not built into ErrorKit. This is, as you can see, I just copied it here. But what's built into ErrorKit is the Mail Composer modifier and the ErrorKit.log attachment. ErrorKit comes built in with a very simple function, as you can see, that collects all the log files from like the logs you want to know for the period you want to have it for. And internally, like if you wanted to do that yourself, it's a bit more. You can see it's creating a mail attachment. There you go. It's a bit more involved. You have to create an always log store, say like, it's a bit more involved API, but actually Apple has built that into OS log. So it's really, really cool feature. I also recommend checking it out. Even if you don't use ErrorKit, you want to send like logs. This is really cool. I discovered it, and I think many people don't know this, but I implemented it for you. So it's as simple as one line of code.
Nice.
And it not only works as attachment, it also has a function which just says log file. So you just get a file.
And then you just dump it into a file.
Or you can get logged data. So you can send it to a server or something like that.
Yeah. That is pretty convenient, yeah.
And that's the Swift UI part. I really recommend just add a simple report a bug problem with just a few lines of code with ErrorKit, and then you might get some really useful bug reports from users.
Yeah, although I have to admit, every time an app crashes on my machine, and I see the dialogue saying, "Hey, it crashed. Would you be interested in sending this log to Apple or the developer?" Specifically when it's for sending to Apple, I'm like, I don't know. Will it ever be read? I mean, that's
okay.
That's the issue, right?
I just had an audio problem here. Can you still hear me? It's all good?
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, I just said, whenever I see one of those error dialogues saying, "Hey, a crash happened with that app. Would you like to send a report to Apple or whomever?" I'm like, not sure about that. Is there anybody who's actually reading them, right?
Right, but that's like that's crash reporting, and this one is bug reporting. I think those are very different things. Although, of course, crashes are bugs as well. But crash reporting is a very specific thing, which means that your app crashed, and then obviously something was wrong. So Apple has this built-in system, but this is specifically about a user wanting to send you something, because if you add a report a bug to your settings,
gotcha.
It's not a mogul that appears automatically. The user has to go in there, press report a bug. Yeah, you could of course put it into a dialog if you wanted, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Okay. So the impetus is already much higher. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, very cool. All right. So did we go through all the features?
There are some details, but those are the main features.
Okay, cool. So, folks, if you have any questions for Cihat, drop them into the chat, and we still have a couple of minutes. I think he would be happy to answer. So yeah, maybe while we wait for people to drop in some questions, what would you recommend in terms of adopting ErrorKit and making sure that you write better error messages and make them more useful for people? What is, if we take a step away from the actual code, what is a good strategy for error messages? What would you recommend?
So generally speaking, I think error handling is something that often is neglected, but also often is misunderstood, because error handling is not only about it. Like ErrorKit is about like thrown errors basically, but errors like in general I don't think are only the errors that you throw in some function, but I would define error handling or errors as anything that was unexpected, either by the user or by you as a developer. And oftentimes, the reason you run into an error or a bug is because you had some assumption about the environment, about the user, about data that just doesn't hold true. And then you run into problems because you were like, even if you didn't write any logical bugs in like what you tried to achieve, you might still find that the assumptions you had just don't hold true, and that's how things get wrong. Because with your assumptions, you might be a perfect developer, get everything right, but if the assumptions are not true, then everything else you based onto your assumptions were wrong. And to find out what wrong assumptions you had, you have to somehow analyze it. So I really recommend, I think that's the most important thing that you can really do, is try to, each time you have an assumption, try to really make clear in the code that you currently had an assumption, that you are assuming that the user has, I don't know, a file there, or a name that has a specific length. And then there are different ways to deal with it. You can, like the worst case thing you can do is just fatal error when the assumption is not true, like the length is
do a hard crash.
Yeah, but you shouldn't do that, because there's always the way to, you can always assert error. You can assert always. Assert is like a fatal error during development, but it will not crash your app for the user. So assert is always better. I would say that this is also some kind of preventing errors in your app. But the other thing I would really recommend is whenever you have these assumptions, try to make it part of the code. And one way to do it is to throw errors. So I found myself writing more and more errors the more and more I thought about this this way. Like, I'm now having an assumption, because that's also how Apple develops system frameworks. Whenever they have assumptions, they make sure, okay, here in file system, I don't know, file manager dot delete file or copy or something like that. Even if they might assume like, okay, you have enough space to copy file A to B, you might run into not having enough space in some cases. So they have to make this function throwing. And that's how you should think about your own functions. Whenever you have assumptions and they might not be true, you should be throwing errors. And if you use like the throwable protocol, you can also have good structure. If you want to have the error chain thing, you can use the catching protocol. Or if you, whatever, what I definitely recommend is, if you do this, also send you the errors that did happen to some analytics or some way you can analyze and find out which are the ones that happen most often, because you will find that some edge cases you think are edge cases are actually very normal cases, and then you should really fix them.
Okay, so it sounds like you'd advocate for error-driven development.
I don't like any driven developments, but I would say data-driven development maybe.
Yeah.
Because data-driven, like any decision you make should be data-driven. And if you want to make a good decision, like what you should work on next on your app, is it a new feature? Is it more marketing? Or is it actually making your app better? You have to know the data. And if you have the analytics, knowing how many errors happen and which errors happen, you can make a more informed decision. You can still ignore it, but then at least you know that you can ignore it.
Yeah, I like that. So while we were talking, I Googled error-driven development, and there's actually an article that somebody wrote on dev.to that is labeled error-driven development ?
Interesting. Yeah, I should read that.
Yeah, it's apparently a pun on test-driven development. But yeah, I mean, so I've looking back at all of the code that I wrote, and even going back to the very, very early days when I was a Java developer at Lufthansa, and I think if you look at how I handled most errors, it would probably be just print, right? So there is an error that's thrown, and then you just print the error message to the console, and that's it, which really is not a good way to deal with an error, because at one point you'll need to figure out, okay, so what am I going to do with the thing, right? It's somehow like, I don't know, like if you like a hot potato, right? So you throw somebody a hot potato and they'll be like, I don't know what to do with this, like
Exactly.
throw it to the next person. So and maybe that's another question. So what where does it end? Like, so you catch the error and you make sure that you've got good error messages, but at the end there is like an ultimate point where you need to do something with this thing, right? So you need to either talk to the user and say, all right, so here's a situation, I think you might be able to resolve that, or you'll ultimately have to say, well, we actually ran out of disk space, we can't go on, we must crash, right? So do you have any insights you can share on that?
Yeah, I think showing an error to a user in a nice way is actually not too bad of a fallback or default, because that's like the thing you can always do. You have always a text message, so you can always
Mhm,
show that to the user. And if your error message is better than, I don't know, some system errors, it might actually help the user understand, okay, maybe I did this wrong, or I don't have enough space, so they can fix it yourself. It can help
mhm,
them. But I think at the end of the day, what really matters is always the user experience. So what is the
mhm,
best user experience for each case? And if you have the time to think about that, there are different ways to handle. So showing to the user is the most common thing, but there are other ways. So for example, what you can do is when your error is that some data is missing, you can just create an empty state, which
mhm,
is like a different UI thing. And you can just automatically switch to that and say like, okay, if we have, I don't know, file not found, instead of showing an error to the user, you just switch to an empty state, which has a call to action, like create a new file or
mhm,
gives system access or something like that. So you're asking the question basically, why is this empty? And then giving that to the user. Another thing you can do is give the user a call to action. So some error cases, if you know the exact case, you know, like, okay, this is actually something where the user can do something. So instead of showing what failed, you just give them a button or some text or
mhm,
description or link what they can do. Like I don't have a good example right now, but if you like know that the project setup has not been completed, and that's like the error, then you could just add a button to open the project editor, and then in
mhm,
the editor you can just show the field that is missing some data or something like that.
mm,
So that's like the call to action kind of thing. And the last thing that many people also probably already heard of is you basically try to repair the error automatically. So if you know something specific that might go wrong because of that's also why I always say like really track the data about like how many errors happen where. Because what I learned in TranslateKit, for example, one of my apps, is that in some cases the error the users get is actually something that I can fix as a developer by just making, for example, my parser. I have like a string catalog parser, and they just have some things I just didn't expect in there, like
mhm.
some
Unicode.
combination of some combination of plurals and device specific or something like that. And my parser just failed with that. So what I could do is just make my parser more resilient. So
Mhm,
I can automatically, so when that happens, still my internal model, I haven't changed my internal model, but I just handle it better. I just say like, okay, I don't say I can't open this file. Instead, I just open what I can, and the few data fields that I can't open, I just ignore them, for example, or I just keep them in a way that I can save them back, but you can't edit it or something like that.
mhm,
So auto repair in some way is, I think probably one of the best ways to handle it.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just like, I think it's this extra mile you have to go as a developer, right? Because I think we typically think about the happy path and then the features that we want to implement, and then anything that is kind of like an exception tends to feel like something that gets into the way, right? You want to implement this feature, and then you realize, oh my God, there are so many things that can go wrong, and then you need to start thinking about handling them. But yeah, it's and that's another question that I had. I mean, like there are so many things that can go wrong, and if you try to handle all of them, you'd probably never ship, right?
Yes,
So
yes, yes, yes.
what's the best strategy there? Should you just say, okay, so I'm just going to handle the top 2 or 3 ones, and then everything else is going to be generic, like you implemented in your protocols?
I think it really depends, but at the end of the day, what really matters for like it depends on like for example, for me as an indie developer, what counts at the end of the day is the money I get and
Mm-hmm.
the maybe the respect that our other developers have, because I specifically develop developer tools, and because I face these users in
Mm-hmm.
conferences and stuff. It's not
Yeah.
only about money, it's also about like them not being angry at me. So that also counts, but it really matters. Like if money is your only concern, your decisions should also only based on that. But errors are not something that are unrelated to money. Quite the opposite. You might have a really bad onboarding. You just don't know because you're not knowing the edge case. Like I said, errors are not always bugs in your logic. Errors might just be assumptions you had, which might not be correct. And this might be something in your onboarding that prevents users from actually using your app engaging in it. Or it might be something that prevents them from being convinced to pay for your feature, your app, because they feel like, okay, if this doesn't work, I'm not really sure if in 3 months this other thing I want to do is still going to work. So you really want to know if these issues your users might run into actually prevent you from reaching your goals, which is like getting more money, getting more users. And making users happy is not goal just for itself. It's also useful for your own goals. So I think that's like the focus you should have is if you have still other places you should work on, because you obviously know this thing is completely bad, you should just focus on that and maybe not waste time with error handling. But I would also always say, in general, you should have like a default level of error handling basic that you just do. So you just write, for example, good code that you can understand in a year from now. Because if you don't write that kind of code, you also have a maintenance problem long term. So there are many things to consider. And so I think you should have a minimum level all the time. And ErrorKit can actually help make that minimum level higher because it has all these conveniences built in. But when it comes to like error chain debugging and sending to analytics, do that when you have the feeling you don't really know what else to optimize. It can really be like an eye-opener.
Okay. Very good. I think that's a really nice way to wrap it up. To inspire people to think positively about errors and see them as an opportunity to make sure that users love your application and get a good experience, and make them recommend your app and give you more money, more respect. Very good.
Great.
All right. I think we covered a lot of ground. So I learned a lot and I was really inspired. So I will definitely add ErrorKit to my app, and that's probably something that I'll do in the next live stream. So you're more than welcome to watch on next time I go live. But I'm going to be out for 2 weeks. So folks, for everybody who's watching, this series of live streams will continue. Don't worry about it, but I have to recharge and, take some time off. So I'll be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, and then I'll be back. Cihat, before I let you go, where can people find you? Where is a good place to learn more about you, about all your tools? Do you want to show a QR code?
I don't have a QR code prepared, but you can go to flying.dev. I don't know.
Do you want to call it up on the browser so it's easier for people to see?
Yeah, sure.
Let me find your Safari.
So yeah, this is basically flying.dev, and this is my blog. You can find all kinds of articles I wrote and also other tools I do. And I also post about my apps here. Otherwise, you can find me on Blue Sky, on Mastodon, and on Twitter. But I recommend Blue Sky. That's what I prefer. And my handle is always Cihat. So you can always just search for Cihat and you should find me.
Very good. Yeah, and I really like that you made it easy for me to pronounce your name, because I think I would have failed trying to pronounce your name by just looking at how it's spelled.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with the handle.
Very good. All right, cool. Thanks for coming on. For everybody who's watching on, thanks for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day, wherever you are. And I will be back in 3 weeks. Thanks, Cihat. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.